Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our next keynote address. My name is Dennis Ringland. I'm the chairman of the sponsorship for the MIT CEO Symposium. How do you introduce Tom Davenport, a man who's been named one of the most influential consultants in the world in analytics in 30 seconds or less? Well, here I go with the basics. Distinguished professor of management and IT at Babson College, lecturer on analytics at MIT Sloan, Harvard Business School, Boston University, and Babson College. Fellow of the Initiative on the Digital Economy, co-founder of the International Institute for Analytics, and senior advisor for Deloitte Analytics. He is the author of Only Humans Need Apply and 17 other books, including Competing on Analytics, which had a hand in starting the big data revolution, in my opinion. And it generated the phrase that data science is the sexiest job of the 21st century. His latest endeavor is a new book called The Cognitive Company. It's too early to pre-order, so I ask you to keep your eyes open for it when it is published. It will be, again, quite revealing and true thought leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my friend, Professor Tom Davenport.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Dennis. Very happy to be here. Somebody did a good job of designing the morning because we're moving from Eric and Andy talking about sort of the long-term future to this last panel talking about the short-term future of the same topic, AI, cognitive technologies, and I'm going to talk about what's happening today. Maybe this is better right before lunch because what's happening today is much less scary than what Eric and Andy were talking about. My talk will be much better for your digestion, I suspect. So it's hard to know what to think about these technologies. On the one hand, there are a lot of people very concerned about humans being out of work. Turns out the fears generally get more attention than the cheers. Smart people like, my presentation has taken on some autonomy there. It's moving by itself. People worried about entire professions like truck drivers being wiped out, as we just heard. Go back, stay there. Riots in the streets, some people talk about, really. What is going on? Somebody doesn't like, the AI doesn't like that slide. And people as smart as, Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and so on start talking about sort of robot overlordish kinds of issues. On the other hand, there are a lot of positives as well. As I say, they don't get as much attention, but we do a lot of things that are full of drudgery in our jobs, and getting rid of them wouldn't be so horrible. It's unbelievable. We would all like to see some transformational impact from these technologies. As was suggested in the last session, well, I'll just talk and forget about this clicker. As was suggested in the last session, some vendors have promised more transformation than others in this area, but I think we'd all like to see some of that if possible. There is also, I think, the possibility of breakthroughs in key areas of life, curing cancer or being able to drive long distances without having to do much on our own as a result. So it's hard to really know what to think. I tend to be somewhere in the middle. When I started this book a couple of years ago, Only Humans Need Apply, I was very negative about the prospects for us humans, but over time, that's my great slide, but it's my last slide. So let me back up through here. I am not touching this clicker other than to back it up. we need a golden age of productivity, and maybe these technologies could help usher it in. You think it's going to work now, Lindsay? Okay. Many of us would probably like a guaranteed basic income, although as a sociologist by educational background, I have to worry about the fact that the data suggests that when people get guaranteed basic incomes, they don't take up painting or start, groups to do little plays in their neighborhoods. They sleep more and they watch more television. So it's a little bit disconcerting what this would lead to in our society. So today, I think there seem to be three basic types of AI cognitive applications in business. Let me start with the dumbest one, which is robotics and cognitive automation. There's really not much cognitive automation there. It's mostly robotic, but it's slowly getting smarter. Doing mundane digital tasks like transferring data from one type of system to another, or Peter Weil this morning mentioned the problem of changing addresses at a bank. There's no reason why machines can't do that sort of thing across 5 different systems at once. I was talking with USAA recently, and they're using a form of this to create automated reports for their investors, their customers who have wealth management accounts with them. It's pretty boring stuff. We also know versions of this generate sports stories for fraud at banks or insurance companies. You've got to have machine learning to do that. There's just too much data otherwise. And perhaps the most prosaic use of this type of technology is identifying probabilistic matches of similar data across databases. GE doing that with a Harvard Square-based company called Tamer and saving $80 million in combining all of its supplier data into one master supplier database. Then there's the third category, arguably the hardest. I think perhaps Seth early mentioned it's not easy to manage this type of knowledge, and language is always challenging. So also the least common in the database that I've compiled of 160 projects. I'll talk about it in a second. But these are virtual digital assistants for customer service purposes, and in many cases, these get used internally for employees. So 3 basic categories of stuff that organizations are doing today with cognitive technology. And as I say, working with Deloitte, which the world's largest professional services firm, not surprisingly, is doing a lot of projects in this area. So we have about 160 projects in the database now. And cognitive insights and robotic and cognitive automation are kind of neck and neck in terms of frequency. Not so many cognitive engagement projects. Maybe because it's hard, as I suggested before, maybe because, I don't know, other firms are doing most of that kind of work. It's not necessarily representative of the entire population, but it does give you some sense of what's happening today. So maybe some of you like this show, Mythbusters, as much as I did. There are a lot of myths about cognitive technology thus far. Looking at 160 projects, not a single job lost yet. I'm not saying it's not coming, but not something you have to worry about over lunch. There are 20 projects of those 160 in which there is some job loss that is scheduled or predicted. But nothing has actually happened. And as a result, we need more productivity. We're not getting it yet from these technologies. We'll have to lay off a few people if we're going to get a lot more productivity out of these tools. Transformational applications of cognitive technology tend to be much less successful than the low-hanging fruit. So a great example, many of you probably read that at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, which is has spent about $52 million on a Watson-based approach to diagnosing, treating, and hopefully curing at some point cancer. Not a single patient treated yet. with this solution, and the project's pretty much on hold. But at the same time, the CIO of MD Anderson, Chris Belmont, has said, we're going to pick some low-hanging fruit with this technology. So he has a bunch, I think 7 or 8 in production now, cognitive concierge that helps people schedule their visit to the hospital, another one that helps figure out who's likely not to pay their bill, and so you can start doing interventions early on about that. So those low-hanging fruit things are working out well, and I think probably for most organizations that's the way to go. The fastest growing applications are actually the most prosaic. So robotic process automation, there are some people who have published about this in MIT Sloan Management Review, suggests huge and rapid ROI. Not very smart, as I suggested, but if you're doing back office digital tasks, you don't really have to be that smart. And then data integration with machine learning, as I was mentioning. Data integration is a problem that's been with us since the dawn of time. It's very labor intensive, and it's getting better with this probabilistic matching. Some people call it identity resolution when you're talking about customer information, but not very exciting, but very powerful. In terms of this cognitive engagement technology, a lot of the companies that I've talked with are not quite comfortable yet turning it loose on their customers. So you have companies, for example, using IPsoft's Amelia, who start out having it answer IT questions for you, and then eventually, slowly moving it to the actual customer interface. And thus far, nary a robot overlord to be found. Not saying they're not coming, I don't really know, but they're certainly not here today. So I do think this technology is transformative in the long run, if not in the short. And the breadth of tasks that we found in these 160 projects is quite amazing. Every function, every business function you can think of, from legal to HR, audit. Deloitte is working very heavily on cognitive technology for audit. Some early indications of powerful combinations of this constellation of technologies that we call AI or cognitive. Deep learning combined with robotic process automation, for example, in an insurance company that learned Italian on its own. Watson, apparently the Italian version wasn't done, but this deep learning application was able to learn Italian very quickly and use it to answer customer questions. I think drudgery is on the decline. Eventually, these tasks that smart machines are doing will add up to jobs, and we'll have to worry about this issue of less human employment, but not yet. And of course, when the singularity arrives, can do everything we can do, only better, all bets are off. But most people say that's 20 or 30 years. I will certainly be retired by then. I don't know about you. Some of the financial advisors I like often say getting rich is great, but it's better to do it slowly. And I think becoming a cognitive company is a great idea, but better to do that slowly as well. There are a lot of different technologies. Pick the one that's right for your problem. Don't use a rule-based expert system for recognizing cats on the internet, for example. It doesn't work. Start some pilots, but move toward a broader platform. Have a broader goal in mind. Plan for augmentation. Joy Ito said he's a big fan of augmentation. I am as well. This book that is apparently available for free. I wasn't quite sure how to feel about that. You know, it's like finding your book on the remainder table, but the price is $0. Anyway, it's a good value at that price. I really believe in it. But it's all about augmentation and the 5 different types of jobs that we humans will be able to occupy in the future. And I think, you know, automation is, among other things, just a race to the bottom from a strategic standpoint. It lowers everybody's costs, everybody's margins, harder to innovate. So it's better for humans as well to do augmentation. A lot of this work is analytical. About 90% of what you find in cognitive technologies is statistically based in the underlying capability. And so if you have that already, build upon it. Many of the people who have done that work for you can extend their skills into the cognitive space. And then finally, as we said, in the re-engineering era, it doesn't make sense to use these technologies to do exactly the same thing that you've been doing. We need to kind of bring back the lessons from Michael Hammer, the late MIT professor and consultant who argued it doesn't make sense not to use technology to change the way you do business. So I think my 15 minutes of fame are up. I can maybe answer one question if there are any on the thing. If they're not, I will beat an embarrassed retreat. So far, now my presentation is here and not moving, but I don't want it here anymore. So, anything on the screen, Dennis, as far as you can tell?
Well, we understand that auto advance is not your friend.
Auto advance,
Do
yes.
we have any questions from the audience?
What a radical idea to ask people if they actually have any questions, they can speak out.
If you have a question,
anybody?
would you please stand or raise your hand? You understood everything.
What do you think CIOs in this room today should be doing now in order to
Other than approaching early information sciences for help? Or is that, well, you know, this question came up in your panel as well, Seth, and I think building an ecosystem is a good idea. I think, I think your panel suggested, most organizations are not going to be able to assemble all the capabilities. That doesn't mean turning everything over to one vendor. If you don't have a strong analytical capability, you're probably starting from way behind. But if you do, as I said, try to turn that into an analytics and cognitive-oriented capability. And then I was talking with a big Australian bank last week, and they said that's exactly, you know, they have hundreds of analytics people, and they're going to have some fraction of them become cognitive-oriented people. So I think it's a much smoother evolution if you think about it in those terms.
One more question here.
So you talked about the 160 projects. Any early themes on industry, function, title, type of project that is indicating sort of some clustering that's happening in the early stages?
Yeah, there is a lot of that. I didn't have time to get into it, but as you might imagine, more in financial services than any place else. Some in consumer products. Not that much in manufacturing, although there were some safety and warranty-oriented applications, getting smart engineers not to have to read, you know, warranty reports from car dealers anymore and extracting some of that content. So it's, as we might expect with analytics, it's the most data-intensive industries that seem to be furthest along in this regard.
Ladies and gentlemen, please
Thank
join
you.
me in welcoming and thanking Tom for a wonderful presentation. We gave him 18 minutes because of the problems. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've signed up for one of the two lunchtime events, please proceed to your room. Those who did not get a session to go to, we have birds of a feather in the Rockwell cage. We have multiple tables set up there. Various speakers and sponsors are speaking and facilitating tables in the Rockwell cage in the gymnasium where lunch will be served. Please enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.